Welcome back to another episode of Slow DuBOSE, Alaska and back in 8 miles per hour. This is episode 2, which is essentially our second week from May 12th through the 19th. You know, when you're not driving around in cars all the time, you start noticing different forms of transportation. There are lots of airplanes up here, as it is one of the few ways to get in and out of anchorages and marinas that are isolated. I like airplanes, so I was watching this guy thinking, boy, he's got a big, powerful engine. He should be able to take off really fast. I wonder how quick he will be able to get up off the water. As I watched, I became more and more confused. I'm thinking here he's going to just taxi out and just hit the throttle and take off. But no, that's not what happens. I'm wondering, is he giving these people a tour through the boats? Is he lost? Or is he just confused? Finally, after a while, he gets to a spot and guns the engine. And off as he rides on top of the water, the plane lifts off beautifully into the air, and the people are away. I snapped this picture the last afternoon we were there as the sun went down with this beautiful mist. This is the route that we're taking today. We're going across the Strait of Georgia, which is a wide open space. Here you see a couple of ferries zooming by as they float on top of the water. And the BC ferries were everywhere today. We had to look out carefully to make sure we didn't get hit. Despite Cheryl's careful planning, you can see that we're bumping around like crazy. We sped the boat up, and even with higher speed, we really struggled. You might not know, but boats have different kinds of hulls. One is called a displacement hull. A displacement hull is designed to displace the water as a boat moves through the water, pushing it out of the way rather than riding on top of it, versus a planing hull, which is designed to rise up and ride on top of the water at high speeds. This is done by hydrodynamic lift. It's more common in power boats and speedboats. Ours is a semi-displacement hull. This means we can ride through the water or on top of it depending on how much gas we apply. When we got to where we were going, I took Kylo for his first ride in the dinghy. He clearly thought that this was quite an event and quite exciting. His little sister opted not to get in the boat. As we're zooming across the top of the waves in the dinghy, his ears are flying back. He occasionally looks back and barks at me and lets me know he's having a great time. This has turned out to be Kylo and Rhea's great adventure. And here we are, coming back to the Ponderosa for a dog bone and some sleep.
Really quick, there's there's three things you look for when you cross a big body of water, and are waves, wind, and weather. The shorter the space between the waves, the more bouncy and miserable you're going to be as you go across. So Sunday was a really good day for that. Our waves varied between 1.5 to 2 feet, and eventually about halfway through the journey they dropped down to about 1 foot and had a longer interval between them. So that was great. We had, as some friends of ours said that have been kind of buddy boating with us said, that was a little better than an average crossing on the Strait of Georgia. So we arrived in Pender Harbor. We've stayed here 2 days. Today we're going to leave. We have tentatively set our plans for a 6-hour day, which is longer than usual. It's kind of to try out and see how everybody does, and the great limiting fact in our life right now are the dogs. So we'll see. We're going to a place north called Refuge Cove. Right now, the two other places I had below us where we were thinking about stopping, one each day, have marinas that are pretty full, so we may have to just keep going. We may have to just keep going until we get there. So, but that's okay. We should get there somewhere between 3 and 4 this afternoon, which is not too bad for coming into a place. So weather looks good. Winds, I think, are topping out, at least on windy. Our app for that around 9 knots an hour, so that's decent. And so we're going to give it a go, see where we get. So that's the briefing for this morning.
As we were coming down a large strait of water one day, we came across what looked to be a regatta of sailboats out for an afternoon sail. It was pretty windy, but they appeared to be sailing and racing. The wind was brisk. They had their sails up, and as we passed by them, they let their jibs out and put their spinnakers up and began to run with the wind away from us. It was truly a magnificent sight, and it helped me realize that there are lots of ways to enjoy the world, the outdoors, and the water, and this is just one of them. These beautiful craft moving under the wind on top of the water, with their owners enjoying every moment of it, being out in nature. We came across a tugboat pulling a bunch of logs through the water. Again, another form of transportation on the water that I had taken for granted. I was shocked at how long and how many logs there were. These logs can get away from you, and as boaters, we have to watch very carefully not to hit what are called deadheads, which are logs or rocks or other things that are floating in the water that can make a hole in the boat or damage it significantly. But this was an impressive sight. A little further up the coast, we saw this huge installation on the side and discovered that it was the Powell River Mill. This was a pulp mill that was started in 1908. At one point, it was the largest pulp mill in the world. Unfortunately, now it was closed. We were beginning to learn that a lot of things along our route were going to be closed. Our next stop was a place called Refuge Cove. We'd been told that it was this great resort, that it had a store, it had a laundromat, it had electricity, it had places to eat. But when we got there, the laundromat was broken, the store had been sold, the houses seemed to be falling down, and even the place that was supposed to have telephones didn't have telephones anymore, and we still had to pay $50 for the night. There are some beautiful places to stay along the way though, and these are a couple of them. Our next stop was a place called Blind Channel Resort. It was a beautiful little place. The Richter family has owned and operated and lived at Blind Channel since 1970. In that time, the Blind Channel Resort gained a reputation for delicious food, creative artwork, and outstanding customer service. Unfortunately, they were just getting open, and the restaurant had not yet started serving. Our next stop was a place called Port Neville. We tied up to an old dock there, all by ourselves, overnight, and let the dogs run wild. In 1891, Hans Hansen arrived at Port Neville. He'd rowed up the coast in a small sloop, and he knew this was where he wanted to stay. He acquired the 120 acres and in 1895 started a post office. He married a widow named Elizabeth Flintham, and they had a small son, Billy. She died, and 2 years later, he left and went back to Norway to find a second wife. He brought her back, and they had 5 children. In 1920, they started a family home, and it was completed in 1924. Then he started a store. The government wharf was built, but in 1939 he passed away. The next generation then took over and had 4 kids, and most of them lived there for their lifetimes. But in 1960 the store closed. Olaf, his son, passed away, and then his wife passed away. The last remaining members of the family moved away, and now the family just comes there for vacations. It seems that many people who lived along this part of the Sunshine Coast moved away over time. Our next stop was a place called Port McNeill, which had about 2,500 people, and is really the last place to provision before going across the top of the tip of Vancouver Island into the outback, basically, of Canada, where there are few moorages, few marinas, and basic services are really not present. This was a pretty little town, but it was a working town where shrimpers made their living zooming in and out of the marina where we stayed, filling up their tanks of gas and going back out to catch shrimp. We ran into a man there who had a boat that he'd been using for 30 years and had done over 140,000 miles of ocean voyaging on his boat. He was a great resource and gave us some tips on how to find our way around up in the wilderness as we prepared to go off the grid. With food, $900 worth of diesel, plenty of propane, and a tank of gas in the dinghy, we were ready to make our way up into the wilds of northern Canada and southern Alaska.